Dolby Atmos is one of the most exciting things in audio at the moment, and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere anytime soon. As mixers, we need to stay up to date with the latest technology and trends in the industry, and that's why we got Grant and Carson to show you how you can start mixing in Atmos today with nothing but a pair of headphones. Check this out, and next time you load up your DAW, consider mixing in Atmos.
The great thing as we go into this, though, is that new adopters of the format, you can actually learn at least 85% of Dolby Atmos on a set of headphones. And then that last 15%, then you can transition over to speakers.
By and large, though, you can get fully competent at it with a laptop and headphones.
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So a lot like the idea of you can't track drums in your own space because you just don't have a big enough studio for that. All you have is a control room. So you go to a to track your drums, but you already know what you're doing when you get there. And similar, if you don't have a Dolby Atmos setup, you can still do the majority of a Dolby Atmos mix on what you do have. Then you can go to a mix room with Dolby Atmos and finish it out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You nailed it. No pun intended.
This is just a pink noise signal generator. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on and kind of pan it around the same way just to make sure that we've got our binaural feed streaming correctly over to you guys. There is a cool plugin by NewGen Audio called Halo Upmix. Now, what this will do is take a stereo source or mono source, or really whatever you have, and it can actually upmix it to a larger output source, in this case, a 7.1.2 configuration. So I'm going to take the drums and basically spread them out across the room a little more. Here's what that sounds like. Stereo. And let's hear that upmixed. Try some different settings here. Okay, so I think that Music 3D one sounds kind of cool. I've messed around with that one in the past. What the cool thing is with this is that I'm still kind of keeping a lot of my character and sound. I'm getting most of that still from my left and my right speaker. If you look at the meters when I play this back, the loudest content is coming from my left, center, right. I'm really just kind of filling in the gaps a little bit by throwing these drums into these other speakers here. There are a lot of different ways that you can do this. You might even just want to send the drums to your left, right altogether.
You could also get detailed and export just your kick, just your snare, just your toms and all that, and get super creative with like panning and automating those elements too.
I think that might actually be all I really want to do to the drums for now, because I'm going to kind of do this mix in stages. Right now, I kind of just want to get audio moving in each track to where I want it to be in the XYZ field. I was about to say the stereo field. And then we're going to get into some processing after that. Now that I have the bass going to object 11 and 12, I can pull open the panner here, and I have access to pan this wherever I want. Just wanted to kind of show you what it sounds like to put the bass all over the place. I'm actually probably just going to leave the bass in my left and right because we have a stereo stem printed of this bass. It's actually probably a good time to also point out the LFE, what that means when you're mixing in Atmos. The LFE, or low frequency extension, you have a little more control over what element of the mix or what frequencies you want to be sending to your subwoofer. In stereo, the subwoofer is just kind of always active, so any audio that, hits your crossover point is just going to go to your subwoofer. similar where in an Atmos mix, you have a lot of control to say, I only want, certain parts of my mix to hit the subwoofer so that it has that massive impact, which is really cool in cinema, but it also works in music. When I turn this up and down, you're not going to hear any changes in the low end. But if I do the exact same thing here, I'm going to go ahead and create a send to my LFE here, and we'll turn that up. Now we're sending the bass to the LFE channel. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the drums here, so I can increase that send. Cool. And I'm really not going to send a whole lot else to the LFE. I'll probably do the 808, but this is kind of a cool way to get a little more control over where your crossover is happening on which tracks. So let's pull up these rhythm guitars. I don't really want to get too gimmicky, as we had kind of talked about, or too fancy, because the kind of meat and potatoes of this mix, as Carson had mentioned yesterday, were the drums, bass, and rhythm guitar. And the perceived hi-fi loudness, kind of extreme parts of rock and metal, I feel are still best kind of perceived where you're used to hearing them in your left and your right speakers in front of you. However, one thing that we always try to do in metal mixes, or at least it's really common, is to use a stereo spreader. There's really no need for that here because we have all these other areas that we can pan audio. So what I'm actually doing here is I'm taking the rhythm guitar, and instead of it living just in the left and right speakers, by moving it out a little here, it's also playing in my side speakers. So the phantom center of this sound is actually living somewhere in the middle of those two speaker locations. So it creates this effect as though the sound is coming from a specific location in the room and not an actual speaker, which is a pretty cool effect. We're going to get into like mixing levels and things more later. I just kind of want to sort of get an idea of where my sounds are in the room. But let's just solo up these three so far and take a listen. All right, cool. Let's check out these lead guitars. I don't think I want this lead guitar to live in just the left and the right. I think it'd be cool to kind of separate it out a little bit from the stereo field. So I'm just going to kind of play around with this for a minute. Kind of like it with the height. I'm just going to go ahead and solo up these four elements right now and take a listen to them. Cool. We've got this other lead guitar here. I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to go ahead and lift this octave part, which is the riff in the chorus, all the way up to the ceiling height left and right, just to give it a slightly different location. Let's go ahead and check out the next lead. This is where I think it starts to get really cool because you've got this ability with Atmos to kind of place things in new areas and kind of allow yourself to have a lot more headroom. And that way it's really separated from the other lead guitar. And then both leads are actually very well separated from the drums and bass and rhythm guitar. So let's check out what this sounds like. Yeah, so this is cool. What it would sound like in stereo because they're both in the same location. and start panning it around so you can hear the separation between the two. With all of these options, there's really no right or wrong way to do this. And that's what's crazy about it. It really does feel kind of like the Wild West right now in mixing if you're trying to do an Atmos mix. So I'm going to actually pull up the stereo mix so that we can kind of do a little comparison here. Just interesting. And actually, I've got a pair of headphones here. It's awesome that I have this, full 7.1.4 system in here, but it's equally important to be checking your mixes on headphones, using both systems and moving back and forth between the two to see if the changes that you're making are sounding good in both mediums. Because at the end of the day, people are going to be consuming this format in different ways. The same way you would probably want to check a stereo mix in multiple in multiple ways. You want to listen in your car, you want to listen in a studio, on a pair of headphones, etc.